Hey, everybody. So last night was the season premiere of season 3 of Scientology and the Aftermath, which actually started with a show 2 hours long about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I could not have been more pleased that that was happening because, as anybody who watches my channel knows, I have connected up with former Mormons, former Jehovah's Witnesses, former members from other groups, and have talked about the similarities as well as the differences between our various groups and the fact that there really are a lot of baseline similarities. So the fact that Leah and Mike got interested in that because of the public outpouring to them about the Jehovah's Witnesses by former members was no surprise to me at all, and something I was very, very pleased to see. So I thought, okay, the night after the show, it was just a blowout, amazing show. We were live tweeting it as it was happening. And I thought, who better to talk to right now than Lloyd Evans, my bud from the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses community, who we have done 3 apostate shows with and everything. So Lloyd, hey man, how's it going?
Hello. It's going well, yeah. The morning after the night before, isn't it?
Yes. Okay, so first impressions, what did you think?
I'm still trying to process it all, but I wish you could understand how big this is for the XJW movement. I mean, you guys have been quite fortunate with, I say you guys, in the ex-Scientology, sort of anti-Scientology movement you've had. Even before Leah's Aftermath shows, you had Alex Gibney's Going Clear documentary and the book upon which that was based by Lawrence Wright. So going back a number of years now, you've had some quite high-profile exposure of Scientology. This is really the biggest we've ever had, as far as I'm concerned, for Jehovah's Witnesses. So to have like a 2-hour slot on prime time, hosted by a well-known celebrity, going into so much detail about so many areas of abuse. It's just, as far as I'm aware, it's never happened before. So I'm still kind of trying to process it. But of course, I'm absolutely ecstatic that it's happened and very proud and privileged that I was involved.
Awesome. Yeah, I really am so excited for you guys. Because, you know, we've made efforts on my channel, and certainly your entire channel is devoted to this effort to expose these abuses. And it's just impossible to get into talking about, you know, cults or destructive cults. I should be very clear about that language. And not get into, you know, finding out that it's not just your group that was involved in stuff, that other groups were too. And I was so surprised. And I guess I shouldn't have been, but I was, you know, when I first connected with you and started seeing your content about the similarities. You know, I think you were the first person in another group I reached out to, actually, you know, when we did our very first video about that. So what did you know, Mike Rinder put out a post today just to get feedback, solicit comments and stuff about the show. What, you know, you were there. You were clearly, you know, Leah, I think flat out said, you know, thank you, Lloyd Evans, for, you know, all of your input and stuff on it and educating them on what was in, you know, what was the rough stuff. What did you think about the final cut versus all the things you guys talked about? Was there anything you guys went over that you thought, oh God, I really wish that had gotten in there, but just time didn't allow it?
No, I don't think. I mean, obviously, you always look back and think, oh, if I'd have only just mentioned this, or if I'd have only just kind of rephrased this slightly. But I think I'm happy to take what I did. I think, considering especially that on set I'd had 2 hours sleep the night before, I was severely jet lagged. Just being vertical was a bonus. So the fact that I was remotely coherent in what I was saying, I'm very pleased about. But no, there was a lot of material covered, and obviously 2 hours may seem like a long time, but in fact, as you probably know, it was a very long filming day and lots of things were said on set that didn't make it into the final cut. But when I had opportunity to see how it was coming along, I was very impressed with the way it was edited. and it was edited in a very coherent way. It had a very clear narrative, so it wasn't confusing. You were moving from one subject to the next, and the stories fit perfectly with what was being talked about. So I was thrilled with the way it was edited, definitely.
Awesome. I was also, it was something else to see those pictures of you when you were unbearded.
Yeah, the unbearded me.
Yes.
Lloyd from a parallel universe in which his mind isn't quite his own.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things, obviously. I think, yeah, that we were all asked, or most of us were asked, if we had any old photographs. So I had a great deal of fun going back in my archives. And it's quite interesting to be staring at pictures of you from the past and it is like looking at a different person, because I'm night and day from the Lloyd that existed back then, so.
Yes, I can definitely relate. I've only got a couple pictures from my Sea Org time. I left with very, very little memorabilia or photos or anything. I just literally clothes, my laptop, and that was actually about it. That was what I left with.
Well, actually, on that subject, because it kind of ties in with my story, I can actually remember when it was getting close to the point where I would be making a firm break with the organization. We had a trip to my old family home, and we knew, my wife and I knew, this was before Jessica was born, we knew that this would be probably our last time visiting my home before we made this break and before I started to be shunned by my dad. So we actually consciously went through my old family photographs. We literally took a scanner with us and we're scanning all of these photos because we knew we wouldn't have access to them again. So that was one of the steps that we took, and obviously that contributed in some small way to the Aftermath show.
Big time. I wish I had the foresight to do that myself. I did. I barely got out with anything. I had a thumb drive with a few things that I've been using, but for the most part, nothing. I was really pleased with the panel, with a large number of former members and the variety of experiences, and of course, tragically, the abuse stories as well. But what was it like being in that room with all those people, all having had that former common bond, and now, kind of having woken up from all of that?
The whole thing was completely surreal. I think I called my wife on the day and said, "This is just crazy. This is like unlike anything I've experienced." Because you have to remember that as witnesses, we're used to doing large events where there's maybe an item, or there's a rehearsed kind of thing on a platform where you're basically underscoring Watchtower's narrative in some way. And these events are in front of maybe 10,000 people. This was potentially in front of millions of people that we were doing this, and we were talking, rather than just parroting Watchtower's propaganda, we were talking about our stories. And so it was such an emotionally draining experience, I think, for all of us. I was already familiar with maybe half of the stories because some of them had appeared already on my channel for interviews. I wasn't aware of Richard and Sharon Follis's story, which I actually thought was the most tragic, in my opinion, about their two brothers. And one or two other stories I wasn't familiar with, but for the most part, I kind of knew what to expect. But even so, when you're all there, and it's almost like a group therapy session, you really feel as though you're kind of bonding with these people and with these stories, and you're kind of internalizing them almost. So it was a very, like I say, a draining experience. And I left that day thinking, I don't know how Leah and Mike do this on a daily or weekly basis over a course of many months when they're filming for the Aftermath seasons. So it was, I left with so much respect for the work that they do.
Awesome. I actually received an email yesterday from before the show aired from some guy who was an active Jehovah's Witness who was upset because Leah had blocked him and he was trying to defend Jehovah's Witnesses online and on Twitter and whatnot. And I explained to him, and I wanted to kind of get your viewpoint on this. What I thought, and what I explained to him was, look, nobody's saying that there aren't good things that happen in these groups. You wouldn't have millions of people involved if it didn't give them the feels every now and again. But to not expose the abuses or to think that those good times or those good feelings outweigh these levels of abuses where families are being broken up, where children, this blood transfusion thing, absolutely. I was almost in tears. And that's a bit hard to get me to on this kind of stuff. Cause you, me, we've heard a lot. What's your take on that in terms of, people who will, are still in, try to defend it, try to say, well, yeah, but we do good stuff. What's your take on that?
There's a lot of irony here, because the interesting thing is that you will hear, and one of the things I've seen, because I've seen some of these Twitter battles going on, and there's been, maybe it was even the same guy, there's been Jehovah's Witnesses and Jehovah's Witness apologists who have been saying, oh, well, what, shouldn't we be hearing from the other side? Shouldn't we be hearing from devout, believing Jehovah's Witnesses? And the irony is, number one, Leah and Mike reached out to Watchtower and gave them an opportunity to come on the show and give their side of the story. I don't think they can be more fair than that. And number two, it would have been impossible to have believing Jehovah's Witnesses on the show. I've been pleading on my YouTube channel to have believing Jehovah's Witnesses that I can sit down with for a respectful conversation, just to hear their side of things and give my audience an insight into how their minds work. They won't come on because they cannot share a screen with an apostate. So what they're asking for, it just simply by Watchtower's own rules, which are designed to protect witnesses from hearing the other side of the argument, what they're asking for is impossible. But there's also the irony of them kind of going on Twitter in the first place and remonstrating with apostates like me when they're actually banned from doing that. They shouldn't have any kind of online engagement with former believers because they're supposed to think of us as mentally diseased. So it's fascinating to see the kind of inner conflict in these people because when they can find excuses to engage with us online, even though they know they're not supposed to do that, they will do. And I think that speaks to, again, a lot of inner conflict within them.
I agree. And of course, I've run into, it's exactly the same. This is one of those points where we run into an exact parallel between the JWs and the Scientologists, because when I have somebody come at me online for, in any forum, about my Scientology stuff, it is universally somebody who doesn't know I'm a suppressive person. And once they find out, I go, hey, I'm a suppressive person, right? If that's actually a test for me, because I know if they keep going after that, I know they're a person who has been assigned by the Church of Scientology to do this work. Yeah. I'm curious, do you think that Jehovah's Witnesses have a similar strategy or an effort? They might have a few guys that they trust who are assigned to deal with online stuff.
Well, there's been speculation about this before, and people have kind of floated the idea that there might be like a department at Watchtower headquarters that's devoted to monitoring apostates and seeing what they're up to. And I think it's a little bit different with Scientology, because I think there's a bit more cynicism with Scientology, especially when it comes to fair gaming. And you can have Scientologists coming face to face with all of the arguments against the organization and all of the evidence of how abusive it is, and they're still somehow able to stick up for Scientology and for the leader and just completely black all of that out. I don't think it's quite as straightforward for Jehovah's Witnesses. I think that most witnesses need to be in total ignorance of what the other side of the argument is. And I think that if there was a department at Watchtower headquarters tasked with monitoring the things I'm saying and, basically what apostates are talking about, it would be a revolving door of people coming in and finding out that they're being lied to and exploited and then getting the hell out of there as fast as they can. So I personally find it difficult to believe, but that's not to say that there isn't something going on. I wouldn't know.
Fair enough. I think that might be fodder for future canons for us, to look into that maybe a bit more. Because I was actually just asked fairly recently, how do these, Scientology OSA people look at your channel, look at my channel, look at Leah, look at this stuff, and not be affected by it? And I came up with an answer to it, but I hadn't really thought about that in other groups. And I think you're right. I think they might be a little bit more susceptible than Scientologists for some strange reason. So I imagine that you got a lot on your plate now. Did your Twitter blow up last night?
Yeah, Twitter completely went into meltdown, and I'm not used to that kind of interest in what I'm tweeting about. So and it's still like that, to be honest. But I find it very heartwarming to see. What I find most heartwarming is not just the ex-witnesses who are talking about how healing this was and how it was almost like therapy for them to see not only that their experiences are shared, that there are other people who've been through what they're going through, but also to see outsiders. I think that's a very powerful thing, to see people from outside the religion, namely Leah and Mike, actually taking an interest in this, and to see this organization that has hurt them being put front center in this way. Again, as I said at the beginning, it's just, as far as I'm aware, it's not happened on anything like this level before. So it's heartening to see people from the ex-witness community reacting, but it's also extremely encouraging to see people from outside the religion saying, gosh, we never knew it was like that, and expressing solidarity with the plight of ex-witnesses and people who are still inside because they're threatened with shunning. So it's beautiful to see what's happening online at the moment.
And I think it's only going to continue. I noticed during the show that A&E has put together another show on another group, some Lord something or other, some Christian thing, I think. And it seems that they've kind of, twigged on the idea that this is something people need to know about. And I think that that's, kudos to A&E for stepping up and producing content of this nature, because this has been something that has been in the shadows. I think these, and purposefully so, we see this with the Catholic Church, we see this with Jehovah's Witnesses, we see this with Scientology, that these abuses have been going on for decades, and they have been extremely able to keep it all quiet. And now it's blowing up in all of their faces. And I couldn't be happier, because I am just feeling this big, warm, fuzzy feeling for you guys this morning, because I'm so happy that the exposure is being broadcast out. There's, I don't know if this is even a thing. I don't know if anybody would even contemplate this, but I hope nobody out there is thinking, oh, now the Jehovah's Witnesses are going to get the spotlight and Scientology is not. No, man, that is the wrong. If that's the idea, no, that's, widen that spotlight. What do you think?
I've actually seen a little bit of that as well. I've seen people from the anti-Scientology community kind of almost being horrified at the thought that Leah and Mike are able to focus on other cults. I think that if you can have that position and then sit through the 2 hours of experiences that Leah and Mike were listening to and still hold that position that, oh no, they need to keep focused on Scientology, their work isn't done yet. I really question what's going on in your head, because the abuse is far more widespread than Scientology. And if you're only going to focus on a religion that you happen to have had personal involvement in, then where's the humanity? I think that what Leah and Mike have done is a beautiful thing. They didn't have to do it. They've got their work cut out with Scientology, and frankly, when you're going to dabble in other religions, you'd ideally want to pick a religion that doesn't have millions of members worldwide and isn't a multi-billion-dollar organization. But they've got the bravery and the integrity to say, no, we're going to listen to these stories, and that's what they've done.
Big time. And there are a number of reasons why this was more dangerous for Mike and Leah than going after Scientology. Scientology certainly has an unlimited legal budget, but the Jehovah's Witnesses truly number in the millions. And Scientology does not. It is a tiny, tiny, tiny little group. Big claws, big fangs, but little tiny group. Jehovah's Witnesses, truly
like a little gremlin, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Fangs, claws. Yeah. So, little bunny, big bunny, So, so now what, I want to ask more about what it was like on set, because I'm actually really interested in, did you guys get it? I mean, had you met, you said you'd interviewed some of these folks. Was that just an online meeting? Had you met a lot of them in person?
I'd interviewed them on the channel over Skype, because that was one of the, because Leah reached out to me a number of weeks before filming, and because there was stuff going on and there were decisions that she was making, and I think she was committed to doing this, and I think that she felt more comfortable. This is my own opinion. I think she felt more comfortable pursuing this if she had the help of someone who knew the thing inside out and had a bit of experience and could point her in the right direction. So one of the ways in which I kind of helped her was by saying, well, these are some interesting people for you to speak to. And, that wasn't the only way that they arrived at contributors. They found contributors themselves as well. But I would say maybe half of the people who were there were people who I'd already interviewed, and particularly Makesha and Shayna, I'd literally just interviewed them, I think maybe even days before Leah reached out to me. So I was able to say, this is a really important story, you've got to have this on the show. So it's actually quite fortuitous the way everything fell together. And again, it's credit to Leah for taking the initiative and trying to get to the important stories that needed to be featured.
Yeah. I actually had a similar experience with Leah myself on season 1. And, I was pleased as punch to get on the show, but I was even more happy to be able to help as a consultant on the entire season, because that, makes it just makes it better all around. I don't know how they could have done this show without somebody like you. So it's no surprise to me that they reached out to you. She might have even become aware of you through my channel, because I know she's watched some of my videos and seen some of your stuff, and of course your channel as well. What now? Did you guys talk about, and I don't mean just you and Leah or Mike, but maybe the other people there, or what are you looking at now doing from this point?
I've not, honestly, that's one thing I don't have any input or control over. I'd obviously would like to think that what we showed in that 2 hours was kind of the tip of the iceberg. We did a very good job of exposing the tip of the iceberg, but for example, child sex abuse was kind of sandwiched in at the end, and that's actually one of the most devastating elements of abuse in Watchtower. And there's actually so much that you can talk about just to highlight what's going on in that aspect of the religion. So personally, I will take anything. I will take any exposure that these issues can get. And I think Leah knows that if she needs to call on me for help again, that I'm more than willing to help her.
Awesome. Well, I think you definitely have a lot of content there. You could certainly take each one of those blocks of of segments of the show and expand on them with a whole series of interviews and videos and whatnot for your channel. I mean, there's just a ton of content there because it unfortunately has been, so there's been such a history of this abusive behavior that we're trying to get out there.
Indeed.
Yeah, exactly. I also imagine that you're going to be inundated with communications shortly. Probably starting today, I think. I think you're going to have a lot of people who are going to want to interview you on podcasts and maybe TV shows. And, you get your name out there and like this, and it also, you become a person that news media people start reaching out to.
Well, who knows? I mean, I'm an activist, so it's in my DNA to grab at any opportunities with both hands. And it doesn't get much bigger than having a 2-hour slot on prime time on American television. So, and it's actually quite strange because I've never been on British television. So I've now spent longer on American television than in my own country. Although it will be shown, I think, on Sunday in Britain. So I'm interested to see what the reaction is among people who knew me, perhaps. But no, I'm in the activist profession. So any kind of exposure I can get that will help to, shine a bright light on what's going on in this religion, I'll definitely do it.
Awesome, man. Well, I will just say publicly, I think you should reach out to A&E, because I think there's a series there. And if there is anybody who is motivated right now to do something about that on an even bigger scale than Leah's show, it would be those guys.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to. I'm happy to accept any opportunities that come my way, but I'm very, very grateful to Leah, and I feel a great. I know you've met her as well, and you've interviewed her on your channel, and she had you, like you said, she had you on the Aftermath show, and you're always a little bit wary when it comes to dealing with celebrities because you hear all of these horror stories of how the ego is out of control and they're totally fake people and all that kind of thing. And all of those stereotypes were just demolished when you meet Leah in person and you see that the warmth and the sincerity that she has on camera, she actually has in real life as well. And she really, really is passionate about this. And I was also impressed with how professional she was and how accommodating and humble she was. She's willing to listen to what other people's suggestions are, and it was an absolute honor to work with her. So if that opportunity comes up again, I'll grab it. But basically, like you say, there are lots of stories that need to be heard. And again, I think we did a very good job of scratching the surface. There's so much more that could be said. It's hard to express just how much there is to go on. Anyone who watches my channel will know that there's a lot to go on each subject.
Exactly. I have to mirror your sentiments regarding Leah. I don't really talk about, the behind the scenes stuff too much on my channel, but meeting her, interacting with her, I mean, I can call her if I need to. I mean, she's so open. She's so warm, and she is as real as it gets. I mean, I tell people all the time, what you see on camera, that's her. That is exactly what she's like. So,
what a credit to your movement as well, because speaking very candidly, there are lots of celebrities who are ex-witnesses who have grown up as witnesses, and it's very obvious from their lifestyle and from their career that they're no longer witnesses, and they even say that they're not witnesses anymore, but they're not going to take on Watchtower. They're not going to do anything like what Leah's doing. And that's not to criticize them necessarily, because we all have our own way of healing, and not all of us necessarily have it in us to pursue activism. And particularly if you've had a hard time in a cult, I can understand why you would want to kind of completely walk away from it and pursue success elsewhere. But I actually think it's a very rare thing for there to be such a thing as a Leah Remini who says, you know what, actually exposing this abuse is more important than my acting career. And so I'm going to use my success and use my celebrity to shine a light where no one else is shining it. So she's actually a very rare entity to use such clumsy words, but she's one of a kind, basically. And I think that ex-Scientologists should be very proud to have her in their ranks.
Big time. Thanks for that. That's very, very true, and a very good point about other celebrities as well. I hadn't actually even thought about that, but that's very, very true. Okay, man. Well, thank you for all of this in terms of your thoughts and feelings and feedback and stuff on the show. I really do predict nothing but uphill for you guys in your struggles and fights against Watchtower with this and the exposure this is going to bring. I do think that people will come away from this show knowing that was just the tip of the iceberg. It was so interesting for me as a former Scientologist, knowing everything I know about Scientology and all that and all the cults and stuff, to just kind of clear my mind and sit and watch this show as though I didn't know anything else about it. That's kind of the place I put myself in when I started watching and tweeting about it. And I really think that this is going to spark a ton of attention on this topic. I really do. So,
we've got no shortage of material to go off, and that's one thing that was interesting when I was helping out in the early stages. I'd get questions like, Lloyd, can you find us some quotes to do with shunning? Lloyd, have you got any good videos of people saying this and that kind of thing? And it's almost like, well, where do you even start? I could give you pages and pages of material on where they're saying really damning things about shunning and disfellowshipping and turning your back on your family. They've now flooded their website with hours of video footage of the leaders saying the most crazy things. So there's an embarrassment of material to work with, which going back to your earlier question about where next, there's no shortage of stuff that you can show. And in a way, the vanity of the leadership has helped our cause, because previously they've been churning out this drivel, thinking that it's just for their own private echo chamber. But no, it's coming back and smacking them in the ass like a boomerang now, because we can use it to show this is how backward and this is how manipulative these men are.
Absolutely. The obvious tie-ins with social justice and with the movements that are, Me Too, the misogyny, the blatant misogyny, the pedophilia, the child abuse. This is just, there's just so much material and so many reasons for other people to hook onto this and take notice and do something about it. So I'm wishing you the best, man.
Thank you very much. Hopefully Absolutely. It's not the last time I'm on the Chris Shelton channel.
Of course
One
not.
Of my favorite.
No, man. Absolutely. No, we got another 3 apostates we got to do.
We do.
Absolutely. Okay, man. Thanks a lot for checking in with me on this, and I will we'll hook up again soon, folks. Please leave any questions, comments, feedback in the comment section below here on YouTube. Good, bad, or sideways. I am interested in your views and your take on things. And I hope you got a chance to watch the show. If not, it is on A&E. A&E is admittedly not the easiest thing to get because they don't stream the channel, but you can find the show around. And I'm sure before too long, it'll pop up in public venues that maybe it shouldn't be on, but at least it'll give you a chance to check it out. So with that said, I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming around.